Welcome everybody. My name is Beatrice Toner. I'm a family support worker at Saanich Neighborhood Place, and I'm really excited to be joining forces with child and youth mental health clinicians on this special back to school info session around kind of coping with anxiety in these odd times returning to school. I want to recognize first of all that we are on the territory of, well, I am on the territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. We serve with SMP, we serve into Saanich territories too. So yeah, just want to recognize the beautiful day that we're having and the land that we're on. So just a few little housekeeping things. This session is being recorded so that we can have it available online for you folks to watch again or to share with others. So if you miss something, don't be afraid that will be there online afterwards. There's a Q&A function to use during the session. So if you have a question that comes up while we're talking, please feel free to put it in the Q&A. We'll have some time at the end to talk about those questions directly. If you still have questions at the end that you come up with afterwards, you're welcome to email me through the event page where you registered, or also you can join us tomorrow. We have a virtual parenting hour with Saanich Neighborhood Place, and I'll be sending everybody information about that. So it's a weekly parenting hour, so I'll be emailing out information about that. Without much further ado, I want to welcome Amita Dudani and Mariah Perrin and Heather Vale from Child and Youth Mental Health. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll let you guys take it away.
Thanks a lot, Bea. We're really excited to be here again, and this time we have another colleague with us, Amita, who has a lot to share with you today. So welcome everybody who's able to make it. Our goals for today are on the next slide.
Of course, no, it's not
There we go. To provide some general tips and practical tools for you guys to reduce back to school stress and anxiety. And it's particularly difficult this year because of COVID and things. So we're aware of that, and we really want to give you some specifics about how to manage the different kind of stress that might be coming up about that. But all of the tools and tips that we give you will be useful for any kind of anxiety as well. And to understand anxiety related to back to school and to make your transition back to school as smooth as possible. It's always a tough time, but this year it may be a little bit more difficult. There's new challenges, and to share some simple mindfulness and grounding practices to find some ease during these challenging times. And Amita is going to put those in throughout the presentation. So I invite all of you to join us in those experiences and see if they can be helpful to you as well now and later. Thanks.
Great. So I'll start just a little bit off with some very general tips that can help in these unusual times. We'll be covering how to stay informed, how important self-care is, particularly now, the benefits of planning ahead. We know that a lot of parents right now are struggling maybe with some decision-making anxiety and possibly even also guilt about sending their child back or not sending their child back. How to communicate with your children in these times, and then looking at restoring routines to help ease back into the fall. Thanks, Bea. So here's our first point, staying informed. These are, as you know, I don't have to say it again, really unprecedented times, really unusual times. The anxiety level of everyone is just up, if you're not just, or even more than that. No times like these, what can help us is to have as best of solid, reliable information that we can, realizing it keeps changing too, which makes it challenging. So, you know, as around now, probably in the coming week, we'll be getting more and more communication from hopefully our principal, vice principal, from our school district about what the school is going to be looking like. Once that communication is passed on to us, if you're not sure, if you still have questions, if it seems to be ambiguous, you know, we'd encourage you to reach out and try to get clarifications as best as you can. The more information you have, the most likely more at ease you will be to do this next transition too, and then to also communicate that to your child as well, which we'll talk about how to do that. So there's a lot of information out there, and I would just encourage that we go to the sources that can provide us with the most reliable information at this time, and open up those communication channels, particularly in the next few weeks and of course beyond, but I can imagine the next few weeks will be especially important. Thank you, Bea. Practice self-care. You've probably heard this many times, and yet it is so important we're putting it out here right at the beginning, because whenever things get tough, that's sort of, at least for me, sort of the first thing that can slide, and yet it's probably the most important thing to put back on. And always think about, you know, the airplane announcement. If the plane is in trouble, or there's, you know, the oxygen mask comes down first, put on yours first, and then help the more vulnerable person. So that analogy works really well in this context too, is that we can't take care of the people relying on us if we're having a really tough time. So prioritizing that, especially when things are rocky, will help a lot. And at the same time, it's such a beautiful model for your children as well too, to, you know, how to model with stress, how to manage stress, how to manage anxiety. That will just reap a lot of benefits if they can see you be able to do some of these things. And you know, it's easier said than done, but we'll get some actually practice within this presentation as well too. Prioritizing rest and sleep, so we have a chance to just recharge. I think we'll all probably actually need more of that than ever right now. There's a lot of news, there's lots of social media consumption, and it's so easy to get, you know, sucked into that. But we also know that that practice, if we indulge too much in it, almost, that it can really increase our stress level and worries as well too. So get the information you need, and then if it's hard for you to disengage, you know, trying to put some more firm boundaries about it. I'll check it one time in the morning, one time at night, and then I leave it. Making space for some joy and fun, again, amazing practice just to recharge some of those batteries as well that we really need now going into the fall. That will present its own challenges. So balancing that out with some fun things, and this will look different for everybody. So for some that might be run or jog, for some that might be, you know, walk in nature, having a cup of tea, reading a book. So it looks different for everybody. And then practicing some daily grounding and mindfulness. And Anita will take us through a short practice. Next slide.
Hey, thanks, Mariah. And hello, everybody. So as Sarah mentioned at the beginning, we're really grateful, first of all, that you're all here. And we wanted to intersperse a few very simple mindfulness and grounding practices that might help you, and also perhaps help your kids, your family members during this time. They're very easy to incorporate. And just in case some of you not be aware, mindfulness, what it means is coming and being in the present, like for short. There's simple ways to really get us into the present moment, because this is a time of high uncertainty and high anxiety that a lot of folks, a lot of us might be feeling. And of course, let's pick up on that. So so I invite you, if you can take these pauses throughout as you're here with us today, to think of it as the self-care piece a little bit. So it's like filling your tank, replenishing, putting on your oxygen mask, and a way of resourcing yourself, you know, that might, and it's a check-in, time to check in yourself, because we don't often on busy days get a chance to do that. So I invite you all to stop what you're doing. This is what the first step of mindfulness is: stop whatever you're doing. And I invite my colleagues, Mariah and Heather, to join in the practice as well. So the first practice is a simple practice called feeling your feet. And it's a great one to ground. I'm going to guide us through, and you see the pictures of trees here. And the tree is a beautiful metaphor and visual for us to ground into the earth. So you can close your eyes or leave them open, or sometimes it's helpful to just lower your gaze so that you minimize the stimulation. So you don't need to look at the screen right now. Just sit in a way that, or if you're sitting or standing, where your feet can really be firmly planted on the ground. So you can feel the ground, and of course, through your shoes or sandals or whatever you're doing. And just take a moment here to, first of all, really feel your feet. You know, just that weight distribution, kind of the whole sole of your feet anchored to the ground. And just relax your whole body. There's nothing else to do right now. If you find the visual of a tree helpful, you might envision, just like a tree, you know, the roots, the bottom of the tree with the roots that extend out. You might imagine the roots sinking and anchoring into the ground. Really feel the sensations at the bottoms of the feet right now. Breathing easefully. You may intentionally now just shift the weight slightly to the outer edges of your feet, and perhaps without lifting your shoes or your feet off the earth, just shift the weight to the outer edges and imagine lifting that inner arch or inside edge of the feet. And you might be wondering, why are we doing all this right now? It's okay, just go with it. And just notice how it makes you feel. And now I invite you to shift the weight to the inside edges of your feet for a moment, for a few moments. Again, just breathing easily. Shifting to the heels now, lifting the toes up perhaps. Now take a moment to place each one of the toes individually, feeling each toe as you place it down on the ground. Feeling the full soles of both feet, all four corners evenly anchored to the ground. Sometimes some people find it helpful to just have a gentle pressure pressing down, but to really feel the intention of grounding into the earth. And notice how it affects your body, your energy, your emotional state right now. And if your eyes are closed, slowly begin to open your eyes, flutter them open, thinking a few times to come back. And just take a moment and recognize if there's been any shift since before we started the practice. So we can keep going. Thank you for joining in the practice, and let's continue with the presentation. So yeah, so you know, these are, again, as we go through, you may find some practices speak to you more than others, and I really encourage you to build them into your day, anytime, anywhere. You can stop what you're doing and just feel your feet and feel the feet connecting with the ground. So I started us off in this sort of general tips that we hope might be helpful to you. The third point we want to talk about is, you know, planning ahead. But the mantra here is, you know, plan ahead, but stay flexible at the same time, because of course we have new information coming at all times, and things are changing, and this is a very challenging time for a lot of parents and families that we work with. We know, and it's very difficult. Decision making is hard, and but some things that might help is to think ahead and problem solve. Perhaps some of you may already be doing this, preparing different possibilities, different scenarios that might, if you're deciding your kids are going to go back to school, or perhaps your one of your children is going to go to school and another one for whatever reason is not. And what information do you need to know to help you during this time? And realize at the same time that everybody's working hard to try to get that information across. However, and so the waiting game can be a hard thing as well. If you're gonna need to put into arrangements childcare responsibilities, if you're working, or and some of you may already be doing that. It can be helpful to just it goes back to the communication piece. We're going to talk more about as well, but just communicating with your workplace, employer, with your child's school and childcare, and just exploring the different options that would support you. And thinking ahead and problem solving is kind of like, okay, well, what might I do if this scenario happens? What are the resources that I can draw upon? Because one thing is, you're not alone. So, you don't have to feel alone in this, but just maybe thinking, what are some resources, both my inner resources as well as outside resources and support I can draw upon. And then, we want to say, obviously, staying flexible. The more we, as parents can stay flexible, is you also kind of demonstrate and help your kids to embody that type of mental flexibility when things don't go according as planned. Being open to adjusting your decisions as circumstances change and you receive new information. Another kind of motto that can help during this uncertain time is to just come back to focusing on what is within your control right now. There's so many pieces not within our control, but what can we do that's within our control that can help us? I think we can go on to the next slide. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about this decision making. It's a very stressful time for a lot of families, a lot of parents. I was hearing a podcast of an episode, this CBC show called Cross-Check. I think it's called Cross Canada or something, and they were interviewing lots of parents were talking, and it's still that, and teachers were also present, and there are so many different circumstances right now. Everybody has very different circumstances, and we don't know each person's different circumstances. So there's no judgment. There's no judgment towards other people for whatever decisions you're making, and we hope some of these tips might help in helping to ease some of the decision-making anxiety and possibly guilt, if some of you may be struggling with some guilt. So first of all, I want to say it's very normal to be feeling anxiety and about sending your kids to school versus homeschooling. Really, it's kind of like, as one parent told me, it's kind of like I'm between a rock and a hard place. And thinking about so many different factors, it's not easy. That's another reason I'm going to just pause and breathe, throughout. But there's no ideal solution. So sometimes some people find it helpful, like, first of all, if you haven't already done so, is to first write down, do like a pros and cons chart. Okay, if you're struggling with decision making. Some people find that helpful to do. It's also can be helpful to share that decision making and not feel you're the only parent doing it, and you may want to share it with your partner, or another adult in your family. If depending on the age of your child, it's inviting your child's input into it can be a helpful piece of that. And then you make an informed decision. But the decision is for now, And one thing it's really what can be really helpful is to just, have just rest in your decision right now. Just have some faith and trust in your decision. It's not an easy decision to make, but just knowing that your decision's not set in stone. I talked about this staying flexible piece. Things things could come up and it change. If you decide to send your kids to school, if you get new information, you can pull them back if you don't feel comfortable with having them in school, or vice versa. So recognizing your decision is not set in stone can be helpful also to remind yourself, because the virus is changing and the circumstances are changing. It's important, again, this second last bullet here, that there is no such thing as a perfect decision. These are very challenging, extraordinary circumstances. Nobody's ever gone through a pandemic of this sort before. And, just sort of having some faith and reassuring yourself that you're making the best decision that you feel with the information you have right now. And that might be some, something along those lines is something you might wish to, say to yourself if you're struggling with a lot of feelings of anxiety around this. And the final point I want to say here is, it's that piece around just practicing forgiveness towards yourself and being kind to yourself. I mean, one of the things is obviously we recognize everybody has different circumstances, so it's really helpful to just not practice on judgment towards other individuals for their individual circumstances, their decisions, like other parents, but also towards ourselves. And many parents, might be struggling with the strong levels of guilt, like if I decide to send my kid to school, I'm going to be the bad parent if, my child, touches other kids or something happens, and then they can't somehow get COVID, and those are very worries that a lot of people are having. But it's important to practice kindness and compassion towards yourself. So speaking of that, we're actually going to do a short practice again. And if we can go to the next slide, B. So again, a short practice, and I invite you to join me. This practice is called self-compassion break. And just so you know, it can also be modified to do it towards other individuals. This is a practice that's been shown in research. It's very simple and easy to do anytime. You don't actually have to even stop to do it. You can just apply it anytime. Notice like you're being super hard on yourself, or you are struggling with some really a lot of anxious feelings, or a lot of any strong emotion. And it's been shown in the research that if practiced regularly, this short, simple practice, self-compassion break, can actually shift the mindset on our way of being from a more being more judgmental or critical towards ourselves to being more compassionate towards ourselves. And if we can do that, we can help our kids do the same. So again, for the purpose of this presentation, stop what you're doing. Take a pause and a check-in. You can close your eyes, or you can just lower your gaze. Take a moment and check in with yourself. How are you doing and feeling in this moment? Some people find it helpful. You don't have to, but if you find it helpful, you can place one hand gently on your chest or heart region and place one hand on your belly region as a way to check in with your body and yourself as how you might be feeling. Or you can leave your hands down. Just notice what emotions are present. If you're not feeling anything right now, like you kind of feel a bit neutral, you may want to just for the purpose of this practice, just think about what is it that comes up for you when you are thinking about back to school, your kids going back. What worry, if any, worries are present. See if you can feel what's there. What's the feeling, emotion that might be there right now? A lot of the worry, the stress, the anxiety that you may be feeling about the unknown, and this kind of some people feeling like this is a real laboratory type of experiment. We're being guinea pigs, but it's a very real fear. There might be fear. There might be guilt if I do the wrong decision. So contacting what you're feeling first. And just want you to practice saying to yourself mentally a few phrases. And just notice what happens. Just notice what you feel as you say them. So just staying with a location in your body where you're noticing these strong feelings, this emotion. And saying to yourself slowly, first step is just acknowledge what's happening. Acknowledge that this is really hard. Okay, just even maybe saying those words. This is really hard. You can vary the words. That first step is the mindfulness acknowledgement piece. You're aware of what is happening and you actually acknowledge that this is difficult. It's not easy. The second step in the self-compassion rate is to just normalize your feeling a little bit and connect to the feeling of, I'm not alone in this. There's many others that feel this way. If you can maybe mentally say that to yourself, what do you notice if you say that to yourself? Like, I'm not alone in this, and this is a piece of the self-compassion practice that's called common humanity. So what we're doing is kind of normalizing our experience right now, connecting. Again, breathing easily. And finally, you may wish to tell yourself something, just notice what is it that would help you? What is it that you might be needing? May I just be kind to myself and chill with myself right now? Not going to fix everything, but offering yourself some kind words. That's the kindness element of this compassion practice. The hands were on your belly and your chest region, just releasing your hands. Take a moment to just notice how this practice is felt. Gently fluttering your eyes back open if they were closed. And as really encourage you to practice this, not just when you are feeling, when you notice strong, judgment or guilt towards yourself, but anytime throughout the day. As the image here says, be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best that you can do right now with the information you have. Thank you for joining practice, and we can move on to the next slide. Mariah.
Thank you, Amina. So moving on to communication or communicating with your child. These are just some tips and ideas about how to broach this topic. So we want to get an idea of what our kids' thoughts, feelings, worries maybe be about return to school, so we can help them with them. And one really important thing is that we're gonna, as a parent, as an adult, and our own life history, we're gonna have our own worries, thoughts, and feelings about our kids' return to school, and those belong to you. And when we explore our children's ones, we want to see if somehow for the time that we talk to them, we can almost park our worries or our feelings, or even maybe our excitement about the kids' return to school as well too, kind of park them to the side so that we can really hear our kids. And because children are smart, and sometimes some children especially are a little bit more anxious and sensitive kids will really read you very closely. So we just want to hear what they have to say, independent of what we're thinking maybe. And so choosing an appropriate time. What I mean by that is ideally time where, you know, neither your child or you need to be rushing to the next activity. I find sometimes the best conversations happen in cars where, you know, you're going to be together for 10-15 minutes and there's less distraction. Maybe other siblings coming in. So if it's just you and your child, for example, or maybe dinner table, or when you're having dinner, meal time, breakfast time. So just thinking about the timing of it as well too, and we're finding, you know, to start that conversation using really open-ended exploratory questions sometimes gives us the best information. So in the sense of, hey Susie, you know, school is gonna start up again soon in a week or so. Just curious, like, how are you feeling about that? You know, I know you haven't been in school for a long time, so just wondering, yeah, what you might be thinking about. And so very open-ended, very neutral. We're not going to be specific, we're not necessarily going to assume one way or another. Most realistically, our children are going to have a mixed bag of emotions around this. And they're going to very much vary for the child. And some of the worries that they might express, we wouldn't have even ever thought about because they're kids and they have kid worries. So keeping it open-ended, seeing what you get, being just really present around that, parking our preconceived notions a little bit to the side, and yeah, being curious about what the kids might think. Some kids might be worried about, you know, maybe my best friend won't be in my class. So the very traditional sort of worries that you probably would have heard before pre-COVID as well too, or what if I can't find the bathroom, or I don't know who my teacher is going to be. And then you might have more specific COVID kind of worries, like, well, what if I can't keep track of all the rules, or what if my friend breaks the rules? What should I say? So it can be really varied. And having said that, though, even though we're keeping them open-ended at the beginning, you do know your child, of course, and you can probably make some educated guesses based on maybe how the transitions back to school went in previous years as well too. So it's okay to kind of make some educated guesses about some of their worries, you know, I wonder, see what they do with it as well too. It's really important to normalize their anxiety. Oftentimes kids that are struggling with more anxiety, you know, think that they're going crazy, nobody else has these thoughts, and that then can create even more anxiety. So when the children, even if it's unexpected worries, we want to keep in our head that, you know, lots of kids are feeling anxious, and no worry is silly, you know, even though you know that they know where the bathroom is. Maybe, you know, if they say, I don't know, and maybe there's new rules and I won't know, and I can't read the numbers, how many, or so many worries that can be there, but no worry is silly, and to tell that the kids too, and take it seriously, their worries. So we'll say, wow, you know, thank you so much for sharing me. Yeah, I can see how that could be a real worry. So that's around validating your child's emotions as well. And once we have a sense of what the worries might be, and maybe there are none, you know, expect that as well too. Some kids are just purely excited, and that's all there is. And that's okay as well too. but if we are struggling a little bit with some harder emotions, finding ways to positively express them. So that could be through talking, it could be through drawing a picture about the first day of school, what that might look like. And then that next point is talking through worries, helping to problem solve. And we have another slide on that with some examples about how to do that. Anxiety feeds on uncertainty about not knowing what to expect. So the more information we have, so the easier it is for kids, and probably for you as well too. So having some beginning conversations about what you do know, what you don't know, and how you plan to find out what you don't know can really help settle the mind for kids and for adults. Next page. Yeah, and this goes into this. So we might already, I know we don't know a lot yet, but anticipating in the next couple of days or week, we'll hear more and more about what school will look like. And that could be even things like, you know, my guess is you're going to see some grown-ups wear masks, and some kids sometimes wear masks and some won't. It's just little things like that. And there'll be some areas, maybe like the library, will always have to wear masks. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm just imagining once we have that information, how to share that with children in a developmentally sensitive way. Or, you know, the new rules, I actually can't go into the school, so I'll say goodbye right here, just so they know what's going to look like, and let them know if you have a question, you can always ask, you know, your teacher, or so they know where to get the information if they're uncertain, and encourage them to seek that information. Let your children know that schools like prepare them in some sense. Right now they're open and they're safe to go, and there's adults that are keeping us safe. But if that changes, that we have to close schools to keep safe, then we'll do that too. So we want the kids not to feel like responsible for the safety of everybody. And I know that sounds silly, but sometimes kids will take that ownership on. Instead, we want to send a clear message that, you know, we are here to take care of you. So the adults, the teachers, the principal, myself as a parent will do that, and you can trust us that we'll do what's right. Make a plan, walk through the plan. We'll talk about that a little bit later too, and then problem solve some possible scenarios given maybe some of the worries that they have, to help them know how to walk through that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide. Restoring routines. Kids thrive on routines and structure, and of course over the summer you'll have developed your own routines, and now that fall comes, usually there's a bit more rigidity around some of them, such as you need to wake up to get to school, etc. So because there can be a big shock, you know, if we've been for a few months going to bed much later and having a bit more of a easygoing time in the morning, it's not a bad idea to start getting slowly into some of those routines around now. So, and it can just be, you know, every day trying to move it just by 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So it's not so big of a change altogether. For younger kids, creating a visual schedule, they oftentimes have lots of fun. It's just a good reminder about, you know, we get up and then we have breakfast and then we get dressed, we brush teeth, we leave. You have school, I go to work, I go pick you up, we have playtime, dinner, bed, and creating that with them. The more concrete, the more visual it can be, the easier the kids can follow it and remember it. At the same time, maybe I mentioned a few times that these are unusual times, so flexible, adaptable, knowing we'll have a plan, but that plan's probably going to shift to some extent, and that's okay, and almost to anticipate that's going to happen. So not being too rigid and building, if you know you have a child that has a hard time leaving the house, we might just have to budget in more time than for a sibling, for example. We do. Thanks, Bea.
All right, so we're just going to do a really brief review of understanding anxiety, so that we're kind of all coming from the same place. And we're going to cover a little bit about what is anxiety, possible changes in mood and behavior, and then Mariah's going to take us into some specific tips and tools to manage anxiety, and we'll have a couple more practice sessions with Amita as well. So what is anxiety? I think this picture kind of captures it. I mean, it's known by so many names. It's worry, fear, apprehension, dread, terror. We all have different names for that. But it's a really important and normal emotion. It acts as our alarm system for danger. It prepares our bodies for protective action, and it's helped us adapt and survive. So it's not something we want to get rid of. It's just something that sometimes is a little bit too strong, an alarm system. So that's what we want to work on. And we all respond to it in different ways. That's the other thing, you know, we really want to talk about. And we can learn techniques that help us calm our central nervous system and calm the anxiety so that we can function more easily. Some of the more common triggers are things like unfamiliar experiences, stressful experiences, life changes, transitions. So you can, and a few more, and you can kind of hear why we might talk about this in relation to COVID-19, because there's a lot of unpredictability. And so it's natural that we and our children are starting to feel a little bit more anxious. And it only really becomes a concern when it becomes a problem in our daily lives. So we need it, but sometimes it's over-functioning. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when we get anxious. Oh, well, that's okay. So we'll jump to that then. Oh, you got it back. Thanks, B. I appreciate that. So some of the symptoms we might notice are similar between ourselves and our children, but some are different. So the physical ones are often things that we do notice the same in both adults and children. Things like increased heart rate, a lump in our throat, chest pain, sweating, muscle tension, pain, headaches, tummy aches, that kind of thing. Dizziness sometimes for some people because there's a shortness of breath. Skin changes, you might notice, you might feel the heat yourself as it kind of rises in you, or you might see in your child they become a little bit more red or blotchy, but there's temperature changes. And then there's the behavioral things that we notice as well. Things in your kids that might be different, well, it's probably the same in some adults too. There's frequently reassurance seeking, avoidance of things, might be some, for your children, some fear of being alone. Trouble falling asleep is one that we often see, especially at mental health. Changes in appetite, and with kids, well, and adults, increased irritability and moodiness. But in kids, we might see that more as more acting out behavior and things. And forgetfulness is another one, because we just can't think clearly when we have anxiety. So we can move on to the next, I think. Perfect. So possible changes in mood and behavior. So these are some of the ones that we were brainstorming and we thought you might be noticing in your kids sort of pre-going back to school, or as they go back to school in the first few weeks. You might be seeing a little bit more resistance going to bed, avoiding school, not wanting to go, or not wanting to go on certain days sometimes for kids. New fears and worries that weren't there before, and it may have nothing to do with COVID. Social worries, so how are things going with their friends and not being liked, or as Mariah mentioned, not being in the same class as their friends. And then, as I mentioned, acting out behavior. And we put these two pictures up because I think it kind of captures the whole continuum almost of what we see with children. You know, it can be a really fearful, clingy child and somebody who's really hiding and behind their parent. And then we see that other end of it that sometimes doesn't look like anxiety, but it's just another way it presents. And that's where you see a kid really angry and explosive. And so just a reminder that sometimes what we see may not be what's actually happening underneath, and to really sort of get curious about what might be going on for your child. Thanks. And over to Mariah.
Thank you. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about tips and tools to manage anxiety. So get a cape, wear the cape, and fly. We're going to be covering the following things: making the unknown as known as we can, creating predictability, problem solving together, the 3 R's, and changing your mindset. So we'll elaborate a little bit on the things that we hinted at before. All right, next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned before, anxiety really thrives on uncertainty, on the unknown, and the more we know, the less the anxiety usually gets. So, and the same is true for us, the same is true for kids. So thinking about, how do I share what I know in a developmentally appropriate way? So we don't want to overwhelm kids with all the nitty gritty, but kind of think about, what does my 7-year-old need to know? And when you're engaging with that exploration with them, based on what they say, you might be able to know, oh, maybe I'll need to help them with some misconceptions that they have, for example. So, and then Heather mentioned that curiosity. We really want to be just curious. We want to invite questions. So just ask, I'm wondering, do you have any questions about that? Like, I could imagine some kids might want to know about this or might know about that, and see what they say to that. So really inviting questions, and oftentimes it's the very logistical kind of things. Okay, where are we going to go? Who's going to take care of me? When are you coming back? Like, we don't know until we hear from the kids because they're all varied, but answering them is pretty much matter of fact. Some things we can start preparing for right now because we do already know some things. For example, wearing masks. So at some stores right now, you have to wear masks. And I guess at school, there's going to be some areas where maybe that's also needed. And then maybe some parents will just choose that for their kids as well. So with anything new that we do, initially it's going to feel uncomfortable and weird and unfamiliar, really. And we know with pretty much anything is the more we practice it, we get used to it. So thinking about creative ways about getting kids used to wearing masks, and it'll be varied for all families and all children. But oftentimes we say to get used to a child, get them to do it when they're doing something fun, like something that they enjoy. So I'm thinking about maybe some kids enjoy playing on their tablet or playing video games. So perfect time initially to introduce something that might be feeling a little bit weird for them to get used to that feeling. So, and for you to wear them with them, and if it's a younger kid, for the stuffies to wear them. So you're making it more normal, you're making it less weird in some way and less unfamiliar. The cool thing about kids is they get used to things actually much faster than adults usually. So it won't take very long typically for kids to just kind of be able to adapt with changes. Thinking about also, it'll be varied for every family in terms of how much the kids have already gone out and played with children, or if they've gone to summer camps before or not, for example. But if your child hasn't had as much exposure in the recent months, it might not be bad, and they're going to be going back to school now, it might not be a bad idea to think about connecting with some of those old peers, maybe the peers that they're going to see at school, for example, and arranging some play dates outside so they can practice a little bit being around kids, and they'll know some of the rules, maybe even around, no touch or not sharing food, some of the basics. And if there's no kids available to play with, or if that's hard to arrange before school, then thinking about taking out your children into the community to practice some COVID-19 safety protocols so they get used to, waiting. You have to do a lot more waiting these days before let's say you can go into the store, or keeping your distance, and just not in a threatening way, but more like in a playful kind of way to practice some of these things so that when they go to school, they'll have heard it before and it won't be such a big surprise. So practice to making some of the unknown known, to practice some of those that we know around safety protocols. Thank you. Creating predictability, routines, rituals are so important for kids, and especially for kids that are struggling a little bit more with anxiety in general. So we're reintroducing some of the familiar routines and rituals, and kids get a lot of safety actually from that. So you can almost pretend like if you have, let's say, grade 3 kid, pretend that this child's going back to kindergarten in some way, you know, where you'd wanted to prepare them a little bit for what that first day will look like, that first week will look like, with the information that hopefully we'll be getting now about what to expect. So spend just, it doesn't have to be very long, but spending a little bit of time, you know, this is, I think, what's going to be like. We're going to go to school a little bit later than last year, so you can sleep in 10 more minutes, and then I'll say goodbye right over here. Then you go in, Mrs. So-and-so is going to come get you, etc. And having said that, gathering accurate information from the school ahead of time is very helpful, so you can convey that to your child. In non-pandemic times, we would recommend for the children that have a bit more the jitters going to school to do some early visits to the child's school and classroom. That may or may not be possible, I don't know. However, you can still do probably some play dates on outside, like where they're going to play, just being around the school. Maybe show some pictures if they have on the website, some pictures of the inside of the school. That can all help. And we want to just give them an idea of what to expect. A Zoom call with some of their friends, if they haven't talked to them in a while, and or would be amazing with a teacher too, if they can put a face, if they could put a face to the name, that can be really helpful for our kids that are a little bit more nervous about these. And as much as we can't always have this in control, but if there is some other big life changes, and you have a little bit of control about when that's happening, then we usually say, for any year, we usually say, you know, wait a little bit until the children are more settled in school, so more by the end of September or so, if you can. Sometimes, of course, life just happens, and then we manage as well. Next slide.
Okay. All right. So, you know, going along after the first few things that Mariah said, along with making the unknown more known and creating predictability, these are all things that can help us manage anxiety and uncertainty, and particularly might be helpful for those kids and yourselves who you might be feeling a good deal more anxious about this whole you know, back to school during COVID-19. So one of the things that can be really helpful when they're feeling anxious is we want to help them develop the ability to problem solve. And this at all times, right? Like, it's great for kids to develop that skill of problem solving, because things happen, and the anxious mind thinks the worst thing is going to happen, right? And so, you know, one of the things is in your child's mind, the fear is very real. And it's, even if it seems like it might be a small, silly worry, but if you come down to your child's level, it's a big fear. So what we, along with acknowledging and help validating what they might be worried about, possibly, like, for example, a child could be worried about, like, many kids might be worried about, what if something happens to me and I get my family members sick or something, or what if I see my friends, and that might be something that you might know might come up for your child. Like, it might be hard for them to not hug, and then maybe they'll feel super guilty after. So, you know, as parents, first of all, it's really before, you know, in thinking about problem solving, it's really important to first, like, just being aware of what's going on for you, right? Because kids, like, you want to be mindful to not project your own anxiety and fears to your children, and kids can pick up on that. So, and know that mess ups are going to happen. So let's just walk through some of these things about problem solving. So you can help your child walk through the situation that might come up, they're expressing to you, or that you know might be difficult for them. So again, with that communication piece that Mariah talked about earlier, it's just like, you know, maybe you're having that kind of conversation by helping them verbalize their worries. Or for young kids, draw out their worries. and then you can help walk through that situation, right? And it's helpful to stay grounded when you're doing problem solving with your child. So for example, if your kid is worried that they might, that they might do something wrong, and that they go to school, they might do the wrong thing, or they might like really want to hug kids. Let's just go with that as an example. But they know they can't because of physical distancing, but at the same time, it might happen. So what we can do is, like validate what they might be feeling. In a developmentally appropriate way. Walk through that. Well, what might we do if we really, really want to hug a friend when I see them? Because I haven't seen them in so long. You're probably going to want to do that. What could you do if that comes up? And walk it through with them. And at the same time, you can role play. So sometimes with your child, you may make a little bit of, fun out of it too, like playfully, role play a certain situation that they're really stressed out about, and come up with the coping plan. So here's something we could do. If we feel like we could, if you remember, well, again, it's just sort of like that reinforcement that it'll be really hard, to not be able to hug your friend when you really, really want to. But that's really great if you remember to not do that and keep distance. Could you say hi to them from afar? Could you, maybe, meet them like in the classroom or something, right? You can help your child. You want to help your child reframe their anxious thoughts. It takes practice, okay? It's not always easy to do, to more realistic or more helpful thoughts, okay? So for example, the problem solving can be really helpful if your child is really worried, has big worry. So if your child's big worry is, what if I get sick and then I bring it, and then my family member's sick, that could be a very big worry for some kids. So again, you want to be calm, when you're doing the problem solving, but you can walk it through, and you can help them think about, well, first of all, reassure that, everybody's doing all the adults are doing what they can to keep everybody safe. What might if it's okay to feel worried about that. That's okay to feel worried about that. And you can help them feel more relaxed. We can go to the next slide, actually. We continue there. Yeah. So with problem solving, particularly around the specific concern that your child is expressing, it can be helpful to actually take some time, in advance, to actually spend some time doing problem solving. And the idea is help them come up with some possibilities and offer your own ideas. But you need to be patient and uninterrupted time so that you can actually be present with your child. And of course, they are super anxious. That's not the time to do problem solving when they're really in the thick of anxiety. You want to do it when they're calm and walk through sort of that the plan. And some kids, like particularly older kids, if your kid's in middle school or in high school, it actually can be helpful to work with them to write out a coping plan. What might they do if this situation, if they worry, what they're worried about happens. And also help them to know that they can get support. They can ask for support and ask for help from other adults. And just encouraging that for your kids as well, their teacher perhaps, or a trusted adult in the school. That they're not alone. It can be helpful to just, again, remind your son or daughter that they're not alone, and just when and how to ask for help. And the last point here, the modeling resiliency and healthy coping, well, we can only do the best we can do with, but, you know, just one of the thing about it is just that you are teaching your child that, you know, no, whatever, if situations happen, and even if we mess up, you know, it's okay. We're gonna mess up, and you can learn and move forward. You know, it's not a big problem that if mess ups happen, we can learn them and we can move forward. And that, you know, we can kind of talk about and problem solve through what might we do if the situations happen. So I think that's all I want to say about problem solving right now. And I think we're just gonna do another practice. This is a very simple and short practice called 3 mindful breaths. So I invite you to, again, we covered a lot of information, to pause and stop what you're doing and take this intention to take 3 mindful breaths. So we're going to breathe in, out together, slowly, slow, deep breaths. And I just want to show, I'm going to put my hands up to show this, but actually you can have them lower by your belly. Some people find it helpful to move their hands along as we do this. So, eyes closed or open, breathing slow inhale. Breathing out. Breathing in. Just relax your hands back down. Just notice if that did anything in how you feel. Again, very simple, quick way to pause. Take 3 intentional conscious breaths. And that's all. And encourage you to practice that whenever you can throughout the day. Thank you for doing that.
Great. And we just wanted to share this graphic with you because it kind of brings together a lot of the things that we've been talking about. And basically, if your child's anxious and it's kind of over the top, your child is dysregulated. So that's why we talk about regulation and dysregulation. And it's harder for them to listen, learn, and cope. So the 3 R's are a nice, easy way to remember what you need to do. And the first one is regulate, and that's helping your child feel calm and safe and loved. And we can only do that when we're also feeling regulated. So it's really important to take the time, regulate yourself, and then you can regulate your child. The second R is relate. And that one is about validating their feelings and making them feel connected. This is really hard. Or you sound scared. Those kinds of things. And just letting them know that it's okay, that you've got this. And then the third R is reason. So once they're calm, now you can talk about alternatives and limits and that kind of stuff. But research has shown that the kids can't do those final 2 steps of relating and reasoning until they're more regulated. So kind of have to back up the bus, start with regulate, and move your way through. So that's really brief summary of some of the things we've talked about. And Amita was referring to this a little bit earlier when we were talking about problem solving and just the idea of changing our mindset. And, you know, our brain is a powerful thing, and it'll take us places we may not want to go, but if we kind of harness it and shift it, it can really help us. So some of the things that we've been hearing a lot, or, you know, we might even be experiencing in our own families, you know, some of the thoughts are things like, my child will fall behind in their studies and won't be able to catch up. And if we can shift our thinking to, we're all in the same boat, because we are, like, there's nobody who's not affected by this global pandemic. So if your child falls behind, so does everybody else's, but there's other people out there that are trying to support and help all of the kids move through this and stay on track. That's the goal. The other thought is my child won't have any friends, because right now it can be really isolating and we have all of these physical distancing rules and all sorts of things. But you know, the thing we know about kids, and so the thought is kids are resilient and they'll find a way to connect. They've been, I mean, they're so much better on Zoom and FaceTime and all of those things than I ever was. And they actually seem to feel more connected using them. So I think we can feel confident in just being able to say that. Another one is my child won't be able to follow the rules to keep safe. And this is a real fear for a lot of parents, and so the thought could be something like, my child isn't alone. The adults and teachers at school are working hard to keep all children safe. And that sort of goes back to, you know, we're in this together, and it's important that we remember that, and your child isn't having to remember all of these things on their own. There will be constant reminders and supports for that. And my child will get COVID and give it to their grandparents and it might kill them. Anxiety brings on extreme thoughts. The thought might be, instead, we're doing everything we can within our control to stay safe. And just keep saying that to yourself and just keep doing what you can. And then the last, and I think this is something that's familiar to all of us, is this will never end. And if we can change that thought to, this will pass and I'll have a newfound appreciation for things I once took for granted, that'll really help us, and we can really move through this, because this won't last forever. This is just another thing that's happened and it's impacted a lot of us, but we'll get through this. This will pass. And being able to say that to ourselves is really, really important, because otherwise we spiral and we go down the other rabbit hole, and we don't want to go there. We want to be able to, you know, be in the present now, but also to move forward. So just see what you can do with your thinking. All right, Amita.
Thank you, Heather. And you know, that takes these things to practice, like to practice, you know, kind of reframing some of those really worrisome and anxious thoughts. This we just thought might be a helpful thing that, you know, during time, especially when you might be feeling some discouraged, you know, and again, it kind of goes along with that, how we can change our perspective and our mindset. You know, number one, this is tough, but so am I. So, and some of us may find these statements or make your own, whatever works for you, helpful. I may not be able to control the situation, but I am in charge of how I respond. So focusing on what's within our control. I haven't figured this out yet. Okay, so there's an opportunity to, you know, work through that. This challenge is here to teach me something. And these things can apply not just during COVID time, but just with other stressors we might be dealing with. And the final line is, all I need to do is take it one step at a time, breathe, and just do the next right thing. And that can be helpful when we're feeling super overwhelmed, to come back and just say to ourselves, we just need to take it one step at a time and just do the next right thing right now. So maybe you will find that helpful. And we can move on to the next slide. And our final practice for today's talk. Thank you for bearing with us throughout this time. So I invite us to engage in this final mindfulness practice called stop. And, you know, people have told me that sometimes after learning this practice and practicing it, now whenever you come to a stop sign, if you're driving about, you kind of remember and do this, you know, like the red light and the stop, like instead of, you know, losing yourself in your thoughts, maybe we can practice being present. So I invite you to practice 1 minute breathing space. So the first letter is S, to stop what you're doing, which you've already probably done. And again, you close your eyes or lower your gaze for this practice. The next step is just to take a few deep breaths, conscious breaths. Maybe you also firmly plant your feet. The next letter is O for observe. So what this means is let's just check in, observe what's going on, observe how we're feeling right now. Observe. First of all, observe how your body's feeling in this moment. Seeing if you can just breathe peacefully. Are there any emotions that are present right now? Any feelings? Any strong feelings? Just acknowledging them. Maybe this has made me a little more worried. Acknowledging and naming and even just noting what you're feeling can actually help reduce that intensity of the feeling. And you might just want to check in with the mind and notice what's going through my mind. Like, is there anything right now that I thoughts or worries? This part is just simply observing what you're experiencing, not trying to change anything, just noticing and checking in. And the final step of this 1-minute breathing space is the P, which just means we can proceed. So if your eyes are closed, you can begin to open your eyes. Take a moment and just recognize proceeding in a way that might support you right now. So by taking that pause, just like the other practices we've actually done today, anyway, whether it's 3 mindful breaths or whether it's going through this stop practice or the feeling your feet, it's actually great. What you're doing is you are doing that internal kind of check-in and actually taking that pause to connect with yourself and feel more regulated, as we mentioned, and hopefully give you more resource throughout challenging time. And we can continue. Thank you.
So just here at the end, so just in summary, is you emphasized that communication is really important. So communication with your school, be that the teachers, principals, there's going to be a lot of communication back and forth, communication to your child, encourage the child to communicate with you is going to be really key to help them. The importance of planning and yet embracing flexibility within that planning as well too. COVID-19 has presented challenges that we've never had to face before, and I think one of them is to flexibly plan, as different as that sounds. Mention hopefully also to be gentle with yourself and also extend that gentleness to your child. We've never done this before. We're gonna mess up. Sometimes we won't have known that we've messed up until afterwards. Sometimes we know we're messing up in the moment just because the stress level is high. And extend that forgiveness to yourself and also your child, who's also gonna be going through some big emotions, already has in the last 6 months. So many things we can't control, and then there's some things that we can control. So encouraging our mind to focus on those things that we can control can make us feel more in control, really, which helps with anxiety. Practicing problem solving together, and then ultimately also seeking support, that we're all in this together. And the more that we can seek support from each other, the easier it's going to be for all of us as well too. And then just reiterating what Nita and Heather said, that we will get through this and it will end. So last slide, Nita. Here are just some really good resources that I encourage you to check out around the Child Mind Institute, Coping Skills with Kids, and the Anxiety Canada website. that has just excellent resources on many, many topics, but also back to school and back to school anxiety and coping skills for kids that if you're interested to check out.
Thank you so much, all three of you. That was really, really useful for myself. Even I found so many nuggets in there that I look forward to using. So thank you. We haven't had any questions come in during the presentation. If anybody has any questions immediately, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box, and we can answer them right away. So while we just wait a minute for that, I just want to remind folks I will be sending this out, the recording out, so you can view it on YouTube at your leisure and share it with others that you think might benefit from this. And I will also send out the information on our virtual parenting hour at Saanich Neighborhood Place, which is a chance to sort of more open-ended conversation around these topics, but also other topics related to parenting and the things that come up for you. So if there aren't any questions at this moment, we can probably wrap up. And is there anything that either of you wanted to add at all?
I do see something in the Q&A.
Yes, someone was stating that they were very grateful for this session and also the other ones that they've attended. So that was just a comment. So yeah.
Yes.
And someone did ask earlier about whether it was able to be viewed, and yes, the recording will be available. So there we go. Okay.
Well, I just want to say thank you for being here, and I want to thank you to my colleagues, Mariah and Heather, for joining together on this. And we hope that you found some of this helpful. And as Beatrice mentioned, you can, that virtual parenting hour that Saanich Neighborhood Place putting on is a really wonderful initiative. Yeah, and good luck and all the best to all you guys throughout this difficult time. That's all I want to say.
I was going to say, if you guys have any other ideas about things that you would like to hear us present on or talk about, we're open to suggestions. So just pass that on to Bea, and she can let us know if it's something we can support or help with, we will.
Yeah. Just
grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with Saanich Neighborhood Place.
Yes, we love working together. It's great. All right, well, we'll sign off. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.